Welcome to Marketplace Tech Bytes, our weekly review of some of the biggest stories making headlines across the industry. I'm Nova Sapo, and this week, California enacted strong AI safety rules, which could be a model for the rest of the nation. YouTube settled President Trump's lawsuit over account suspensions, and an AI-generated actress, quote unquote, riled up Hollywood. I'm joined by a regular contributor, Natasha Mascarenas. She's a reporter at the tech news website, The Information. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good to have you as always. And as always, we're going to start with our Byte of the Week. This is where we have our guest give us the number that tells us everything about the week in tech. And Natasha, what is the number you've brought with you today?
Yeah, this time it is not too positive of a number. My Byte of the Week this week is 15%, which describes the percent of board director seats in private AI startups that are filled by women. It was in response to a study that a nonprofit founded by Jennifer Seibel Newsom, the wife of California Governor Gavin Newsom, put together, digging into how diverse AI boards are. And unfortunately, they are not diverse at all.
Wow, that is a very striking number indeed. And it takes us into our first topic in terms of AI, as well as the California governor's office. And that is the governor of California signed a new bill into law that sets a number of new AI safety rules in place. It's being called a first in the nation law, but it could be called a first in the globe law, really. The European Union has AI safety rules, but California's new law goes way further than even the EU's laws go. So, Natasha, can you break down what the new safety regulations are that California enacted?
Of course. And to be clear, this is one that people have followed very closely because a previous version did get turned down. So what we're seeing that has been approved, it's called the Transparency and Frontier Artificial Intelligence Act, and it requires AI companies to write, publish, and then really comply with their own safety policies. If they don't, they face penalties. But think things like, a startup has to report a safety incident to a state official if their model gets stolen or misused. They also have protections for whistleblowers, for folks that are maybe working at these companies and want to share what is or isn't being complied with. It also kind of lays the groundwork for a cluster called Cal Compute, which we can get into later. But it's making the state actually get into the testing of AI models themselves versus just regulating them. So interesting on many fronts.
And is that how it's ahead of the EU even, which passed the landmark AI safety rules, a year or two ago, I think? And so can you help us understand how much further the California rules are going?
Yeah, so it's the first time we're seeing enforceable state level requirements for frontier AI labs. And so at least within the United States, this is something that is really, really remarkable. We know the EU feels really strongly about data privacy and sovereignty. I think this goes that level deeper of really putting more onus on the companies to share their methodology behind some of their decisions.
Yeah, and to do it publicly, which the EU law is, a lot of it has to be shared with the government, but not publicly disclosed necessarily. So really interesting to see them trying to bring so much more sunshine into the practices at AI companies. Could this, in fact, set a national standard? Because, California often does with its various rules, like on car tailpipe emissions, for example. So could we see the same thing happening on the AI side?
What I'm hearing actually more of is that the law sets a precedent for states to get and take a lead in governing AI, which to some investors, that's even scarier. So think about it less as a federal conversation and more of a state by state mandate that could then put a lot of pressure on AI startups who need to navigate this sort of patchwork of different decisions. Of course, to your point, it could definitely go the federal route. But the other flip side that I'm hearing is, what if every state tries to have their own version? Right now, there is AI regulation that's being worked through in New York that strikes similar tones. And so the worry that some investors are speaking to is, more rules and different ones on a state by state basis.
And yet the AI industry in California, which obviously is formidable, did not oppose this new law in California. Why?
Like I said before, the previous version was broader and some people believe more aggressive. This law is really focused on when you've deployed your AI models, please let us know, let the public know how it's going. The previous law was actually more focused on pre launch. And so you know, startups are allergic to sort of more challenges before they're even able to get their models out there. I think letting go of that, you see Governor Newsom creating a consortium in response to all the pushback on the previous version of this law that was tried to pass through. So I think a few sort of key things did change. And yeah, to your point, we saw Anthropic support it. We saw OpenAI and Meta after, it was passed, come out and say positive things about it. So yeah, while I didn't see any parties or get any partyful invites to celebrate it, I definitely saw a more positive reaction compared to
No
last
parties,
time.
huh? Well, that's too bad.
I'm free if anyone would like to invite me.
Let's talk about before I let you before we move on to the next topic. I wanted to also address the point you mentioned about the computing clusters.
Yes.
And my colleague Megan McCarty Carino has talked to a lot of academics in the AI world who are really excited about this. Explain to our audience what this computing cluster, CalCompute, is going to be, and why academics might be so interested.
Yeah, I mean, this is really burying the lead, if you ask me. Not
Mhm.
enough people are talking about this. So, CalCompute is a state-run cloud computing cluster, which, in the simplest terms, is just think of it as a resource that the state can use to have the energy and resources to test AI systems themselves versus just relying on private startups and companies and self-reported information. So this law lays the groundwork to do that. It also, I think will bring California in, much closer in understanding these companies. And I mean, similar to how I hear founders and VCs say, reporters should have had to build a company in order to write about them. I think it will be really great that we can see California live the life, at least a version of the life of some of these AI startups as it's working with them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that develops. They still have some work to do to get that off the ground. Let's move on to our next topic, which is more about the present than it is about the future. And that is YouTube this week agreed to pay nearly $25 million to settle a lawsuit President Trump brought over his account getting suspended after the January 6th riot at the nation's capital. This comes a week after YouTube also said it would reinstate accounts banned for spreading misinformation about COVID and the 2020 election. And I'm wondering, Natasha, whether these two developments are related.
You know, they're connected in the sense that it's two examples of how a platform is dealing with controversy, right? But they are separate. The Trump lawsuit settlement that you explained was about a previous suspension. While the reinstatement is more of looking forward and setting a standard going forward on how topics and policies are going to be discussed online. I wasn't super surprised to see either of these actually, just because we've seen a lot of these platforms try and reset their stances towards moderation and, also just try and navigate a very litigious administration.
Yeah, and that's the point, right? I mean, there is a very measurable pullback among social media companies in general when it comes to how hands-on they are with dealing with misinformation.
Totally. I mean, I vividly remember when Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg announced that he was getting rid of professional fact checking and was then leaving it up to humans and users to sort of self-regulate what the truth is. And I by no means am saying it's a super easy job to, as a private company, or in this case, as a single company, not a private company, try and dictate what the truth is during moments of controversy. But to me, that was a huge moment. I believe announced a few weeks before Trump officially had joined the White House again, but was, announced as the next president. Like a response and at least a reality amid the current political climate. We've obviously also seen Elon Musk on Twitter change moderation as well. So quite a few examples of how social media has changed. And, in some ways it's connected to AI too, I think. You're seeing, you know, folks be very worried that AI is going to make the same mistakes that social media made, which with a lack of regulation. So when I'm speaking to people, I'm definitely hearing the two being compared and folks saying, hey, maybe with social media, we didn't know the dangers. Now we do. Can we, try and regulate it now that we are relatively early in the world of AI.
And when it comes to the way Meta has gone and before Meta, Twitter, do we have any sense of what the results of their pullback has been? I mean, I think people on Twitter would say, it's become rife with misinformation in a way that it wasn't as bad before. But do we know if Instagram, Facebook are facing the same challenges now?
It's something that I have seen actually more on the advertiser front. So when
Mm.
Elon Musk changed his stance on certain regulation and moderation, we saw advertisers flee Twitter, and now it's called X. While people argue that Facebook did not experience the same exact pushback, I think you're right, where there is this general conversation and feeling that a lot of these platforms are not moderated. And as I'm sure listeners, I've seen on these apps, you see the little module of community notes showing up. And I'm seeing that is definitely working overtime in this moment to try and
Mhm.
combat some of it.
Just to varying degrees of success. Let's move on to our third topic. And this one, a, a confounding and for some in Hollywood, an alarming development came out of Europe this week. A London-based production company says an artificially generated actor, quote unquote, it created, her name is Tilly Norwood, may soon be represented by a real-world talent agency. The company's founder says there's been lots of interest in this character, actor, fake person. This news sent Hollywood into an uproar. The Actors Union, SAG-AFTRA, put out a critical statement. A lot of people pointed back to a video that the production company put out over the summer introducing this new AI actress, and I wanted us to take a look at a snippet from that video.
Tilly Norwood, 100% AI generated.
By some company called Particle 6.
Can she cry on Graham Norton?
Of course she can. 3 seasons and a podcast.
And interesting to point out that every character in that video was an AI generated a person. None of them were real.
I think we might be too now.
Me. I think we have a little too much personality. The video, by the way, was meant to be a satire, but it seems to be poking fun at the whole notion of AI generated programming. So personally, I was really confused as to what the whole point of it was. And I'm wondering, Natasha, if this is just a really big and successful publicity stunt and we're just all falling for it.
I think this is a blunt force way to get the world to talk about something that's been happening in startups for the past, several years. I've been hearing things like synthetic humans, like virtual influencers, like avatars that can walk and talk and maybe even look like you. For ever since the chat GPT moment happened and AI really blossomed into something that had a consumer forward play. So when I saw, headlines of an AI actress, I definitely, first thought about the union negotiations and sort of contract talks and how much this contrasts with those. And then my second reaction was, of course, right? Of course, we're seeing an example of this play out publicly. I definitely think to some extent, this is, obviously a stunt that's meant to get people talking about this. But I mean, on the flip side, it's viral because people are, seeing for the first time that this technology isn't just something that startups are pitching or people are talking about in the future, but it can exist now and you can get fooled by it. And no one likes to be fooled.
Yeah. It's definitely, the technology is getting really good. Though still, I mean, you look at the videos and it's clear the characters, if you watch the whole video, that all the characters are clearly AI generated. And I'm wondering though, I mean, I will say that the founder, the company that put this out, Particle 6, their founder is Aline van der Velden. She put out a statement after all the uproar, saying basically something to the point of, this is meant to be a piece of art and not replace humans. Although at the same time, they're talking about this character being an actor in things, in projects. So I don't know how that's not replacing humans. But I will also say SAG-AFTRA, which also represents a lot of people in the newsroom at Marketplace. We're in a different bargaining unit, though. It put out a statement saying this is terrible, basically. Not an actor, it's a character created using the work of countless professional performers without their permission. That's SAG-AFTRA. And then SAG-AFTRA went on to remind all producers in Hollywood that they've got a contract.
Yeah.
That limits, that there's rules about AI characters. So, but if this isn't going to be happening in Hollywood necessarily, it looks like it's maybe going to be happening everywhere else. I mean, it looks almost inevitable.
Yeah, I mean, you're already seeing it happen in magazines, right? You're seeing magazines be filled with models that are not real people, but AI generated. And there's been another debate in Silicon Valley, of all places, that's saying, should we have a little stamp, like a Made in America stamp, but made by AI stamp in the corner? Do we have to? Those are some of the questions you hear. But yeah, to your point, where does this show up? It shows up in magazines where it's sort of these static photos, right? If you're talking about a hyper realistic AI actor that's moving and chatting, maybe it's a commercial, maybe it's something that already, unfortunately, no shade to the actors that do these commercials, but it already sort of has like a very specific vibe, almost feels a little bit like a stock picture. And so maybe there are some like small steps before you're directly competing with an AI generated actor to compete in the latest Bridgerton series. But I mean, it's a slippery slope. And I think the more folks, start to not be able to tell the difference, the more we're going to see it get farther and farther. So it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Well, we think we just got a little hint of your streaming taste, which is great. Well, Natasha Mascarenas, reporter at The Information, thank you as always for joining us and helping us get through some of the big stories of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for all for joining us for this week's Marketplace Tech Bytes Week in Review. Daniel Shim produced this episode. I'm Nova Safo, and we'll see you next week. This is APM.